Let's see what these liberals are up to today. What? What? A woman boxing other women? Oh, this has to be stopped! Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee has pretty much for a long time now been the de facto text on relationships between Indigenous Americans and the U.S. government, and just as an account of how we've treated these people over several hundred years. The story is kind of just repeated over and over again. We find a piece of land that we want because of the farming potential or the minerals or the oil or some other resource, and there's Indigenous Americans living on it. We either forcefully and violently drive them off that land, or we strike some type of deal with them that's heavily in our favor and against their best interests. And even if it is in their best interests, we eventually break that treaty down the road and justify it again with violence. I'm honestly not sure how anyone could read this book and feel good about this nation's history. And that's not to say that all Americans are inherently evil. And there were certainly a lot of people who were trying to stand up for the indigenous peoples of this nation, but this is pretty shocking and eye-opening for a lot of Americans because they don't really go into a lot of depth on this topic in school, but it is for sure one of the bleakest and darkest moments of what I would call modern history. Now, one of the worst examples, in my opinion, of pure evil is the Armenian genocide. If you're not familiar with it, it occurred right around the start of World War I, and it's where the Turkish government drove over 1 million Armenians from their homes and made them march across the desert. Many of them died from dehydration, starvation, extreme fatigue, and heat stroke, but many of them were also raped and murdered during that time. This book, A Shameful Act, covers the event in great detail, but be forewarned, it is a very disturbing read. If you want to go the fiction route, I'm currently reading The 40 Days of Musa Dagh by Franz Werfel. I'm not done with it yet, but it's excellent so far, and from what I can tell, extremely historically accurate. The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chang is one of the hardest books I've ever read. Not because the language is difficult, but because the subject matter is just so brutal. The Nanking Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking, was an incident where the Japanese invaded China and over a period of a couple weeks just absolutely throttled the population. I'm talking about a few 100,000 people being killed in, I think, less than a month. It's been a while since I've read this. There's some very graphic images in this book, and the author, Iris Chang, eventually took her own life, and some people speculate it was because of the fallout and depression of doing a deep dive on this subject well enough to have written a book about it. It just tormented her soul. Interestingly, one of the saviors of the Chinese people during this event was somebody who was a member of the Nazi Party named John Rabe. He was stationed in China and so was pretty well detached from what was happening in Europe and was quite fond of the Chinese people because he had lived amongst them for several years. I did a deep dive on this subject on this channel many years ago, but this is a very infrequently talked about event, especially in American education, and I do think it is an example of a pretty evil moment in history. Now, before I cover the last book, let me say this. I think the recent media attention around the Olympics highlights how powerful, but also how dangerous the internet can be. And it also exemplifies why we need to read more books as a society. And it's for two main reasons. Number one, reading about other people's experiences will only help to build empathy for those people. It gives you a closer perspective to what it's like to be someone other than yourself. It doesn't matter if you come from a different culture, if you have a different lifestyle, or you've simply experienced different events in your life. Reading helps you see outside of your own perspective. Secondly, it is so easy to manufacture fake information on the internet and make it look authentic, professional, and genuine. People can have whole websites up in less than an hour that look extremely real and can spread misinformation like wildfire. When you read books, particularly if you go down to your local used bookshop and pull a 50-year-old book off the shelf, that is an authentic document that was likely very well researched, vetted by multiple people before it was published, and even if new information came to light after that book was written, at least it gives you a true representation of what the perspective was in that time period on that topic. You can't fake old books. Now, the last book I want to talk about today covers an event that hopefully needs no introduction, and if it's news to you, I weep for humanity. It's If This Is a Man by Primo Levi, which covers his time interned at Auschwitz during the Holocaust. He was a Jewish man from Italy, he was a chemist, and he was sent to the death camp and survived. This is one of the best accounts of what happened there and its gruesome brutality, because not only was he a survivor of the camp, but he's also a brilliant writer. This book fundamentally changed me as a reader and a human being. I will never stop recommending it. I recommend that everyone reads it. I hope if you read this book, it gives you some perspective. And the next time you come across something in your social media feed that ruffles your feathers, remember things like the Holocaust happened before you label whatever you're looking at to be pure evil.